Trailblazers Impact brings you inspirational tales of female empowerment. Our new feature is a resources page with a toolbox for productivity in your business and personal life. We have a link to our resource products, including webinars, a book, and classes. And we have a recommended reading page. Go to trailblazersimpact.com to join us for lively entertainment and practical tips.
I'm Nan McKay, and I would like to introduce you today to Jane Finette. Jane Finette is a passionate advocate for women and girls, a nonprofit leader, and an author. She's a trailblazer in her own right, one who rose from small town beginnings in England to become a top big tech exec at Google and Mozilla, among others. She has a new book out entitled Unlocked, which is both a compilation of compelling true stories about women empowering themselves and others, and a practical toolkit and guide for doing so. So let's find out more about Jane. So welcome, Jane.
Well, thank you so much, Nan. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to share for a while.
Well, I'm delighted to have you. Now, let's start out with your experience. How did your experience growing up in England help you reach your pinnacle of success?
I love that you asked me this, and I'm not sure I've reached my pinnacle of success. I hope I've still got some ways to go. But certainly, yes. I mean, I thank you also for saying in the intro about sort of humble beginnings, and it's really true. I'm the first kid in my family to go to college. Parents were both working in factories, and in fact, myself. I didn't get the grades I wanted to go to college originally. And my mum said to me, well, if you really want to do this course, then why don't you resit for a year and get the grade you want? And I thought that was a grand idea. So I had been working at the factory with my mum in the summertime to earn money to be able to go to college and put myself through the university. And what happened was, I had some more money in my pocket, Nan, and was working with my mum on the factory floor. And that I ended up doing that for 3 years. So it took me 3 years to finally figure out that I should go to college. But that was some of the most incredible experiences I had of my life, where to have the humility and the humbleness to work, standing on your feet, like many, many people do, of course, across the entire world, and to work with your hands and to have an awful lot of respect for people who've been doing that job for decades. So I really, I'm still very connected to where I'm from. My mum still lives in this tiny little town called Atherstone in the middle of Warwickshire, right in the middle of the UK. And it really set me, when I look back, a lot of my values are around equity, around access, and coming from a small town which was badly affected in the 80s by the mining industry going out of business, saw a lot of people who didn't have the opportunities. And it was a big struggle for me in the beginning, but I had a lot of faith from family and my parents and a dear godfather that helped me find my way out of Atherstone. So a lot of value setting, I would say, and a lot of humility.
And that's so important, especially today, to have that background.
Yes, no, it really is. Yes. And one certainly learns the value of hard work as well. That's for sure. And to have a lot of empathy for, either I'm presenting or I'm sitting at my desk most of the time, and people are working, dozen hours at a time, right, back-breaking work, and we all have a role to play, a place to work, and so on. But respecting each other comes first.
Let's talk a little bit about your work experience. You had senior leadership roles building community at really big global organizations such as Mozilla, eBay, Sotheby's, Guru, reaching hundreds of millions of people. And what you talked about building community, what was that all about? What did you do?
Yeah, well, and I was at eBay in the very early days. I joined eBay the week after September 11th. It's very, very memorable for me. And this was, these were the early days of the internet. And so people being able to find each other online, cross countries, cross geography, cross interests, perspectives, and so on was really right at the beginning of it. And so eBay really, first of all, opened my mind to the power of community. So if you recall, I mean, eBay was really driven by people who were buying and selling, but always around in the early days around certain interests. So the collectibles department, people who were trading sporting cards or dolls or things like this, they were themselves using eBay as a place to connect and become a community around these interests. If I fast forward that sort of 15 years or 10 years or so, actually, when I joined Mozilla, and I used to head up European marketing, I was the first employee for Mozilla in Europe. Community started to look really different for me, and this has really shaped how I see the world and how I kind of build organizations going forward. So Mozilla always saw community and customers, if you will, as citizens. And I think this is a really important distinction, is that when you no longer think about, I'm selling to this person, I'd like them to take X service, I'd like them to buy X goods, but rather you see them as a citizen, someone who is also part of your organization, then you will build a very different organization and you will build very different products, right? And I love, actually, someone once said, a company never owns their brand. Your brand is owned by your customers, right? By the individuals who care about you, that will make or break you, that will share and talk about you till the cows come home. You never really get to own your brand. But at Mozilla, this community, sense of community took on a new meaning for me, because when I joined, I was an employee 103. And at that point, we had a couple million Firefox users across the world. And I was responsible for European marketing. So this was, the internet was taking off like a rocket ship at this point. And we really wanted to grow Firefox market share across Europe. And I came up with this big plan, man, for marketing in the 7 biggest geographies in Europe. So like Germany and France and Italy, Spain, the UK, and so on, Poland. And I remember presenting to the board, Mozilla, my plan. And John Lilly, who was the CEO at the time, said to me, well, Jane, this is all very well and good, but Europe for us is 42 countries, 42 different language versions of Mozilla, of Firefox. And so what are we going to do for them? And it was, I kind of had the rock banged against my head when I've really begun to understand that we only built Firefox in English. Every other language version was built by a team of volunteers in every single country. So not only did they build it, they localized it, they supported it, they marketed it. And my role, therefore, became one of I don't like to say like conductor of an orchestra, because certainly I didn't have all the ideas, but rather I could be a conduit to empower these geographies to really take Firefox, make it their own, and bring it in their geography where they knew their people and their communities way more than I could have ever understood that. So I've always thought this was just such an incredible philosophy of allowing your customers and allowing your people, your clients and so on, to actually help you build your organization. It's not just about the money, it's not just about the sale, but rather it's about creating an experience and a product that really the world needs. And sorry, I love to talk about this. So I was just realizing I'm going on and on about it. I drank the Mozilla Kool-Aid now, and I owe them so much. I'm still a massive fan of everything they do. When I left Mozilla, I was responsible for all of user engagement. There was about 500 million Firefox users at that time in 90 different language versions. So my job was working with these volunteers, these community members across 90 different countries. It was the work of my life, really incredible.
With a lot of different languages, even
Yes.
you had to speak different languages or have translators, right?
Well, we were very lucky that the majority did speak English, so we'd have sort of community leads, and they would relay information back if the entire community team were not quite so fluent and so on, but we always had a strong one-to-one connection with a community lead, which allowed us to keep lines of open communication going.
How would you say your experience with the companies that you worked with, like Mozilla and Firefox, how did that lead you to the path that you're following today?
Yeah, I love that you're asking me this, and when you look back with hindsight, right, you can see the plan, the journey unfolding, and I'm really not sure I was conscious of it at all at the time, but I see. Particularly the two roles that I've just mentioned as well, and actually, sorry, I did two, and about my background and growing up in the middle of England, that so much of what drives me is equity and creating access and opportunity. And that is essentially what we were doing. Whether I was working at eBay, you couldn't sell online in the year 2000, 2001. And so eBay was giving one the opportunity to sell online for the first time, creating access. Likewise with Mozilla, giving people the opportunity to get online and to have a privacy online, security online, which they didn't have before. And these are the values which drive me going forward, as well as being transparent. The values of transparency, connection, community are values I live by every day.
Now, in 2014, and this probably is in line with your values, you founded a nonprofit called the Coaching Fellowship. So tell us about this organization and go into why you founded it.
Yeah, thank you, Will. And then I have to come back to Mozilla again, because it was in around 2012, when Mozilla they did an experiment, and they decided to give members of their executive team the opportunity to speak and to have an opportunity to have leadership development and coaching. So I was one of the first as part of that group, and it cracked my world open. I'd done a lot of trainings, had a lot of communication trainings, but I had never had this one-to-one leadership development, being able to understand what was holding me back, what was really getting in my way, what were my values, what was driving me. I've made a lot of decisions based on a lot of luck, I think, when I really was congruent, and then later could see it for myself, being able to work with intention. So got very enamored with coaching, got trained as a coach and wanted to give back, particularly because I got access to coaching and leadership development when I had already made it. As you mentioned, I was already part of the executive team. And then you get access to all of these good things. I'm like, where was this 25 years ago when I was starting out? So wanted to try to help young women, and then particularly help young women in the nonprofit world and the social impact sector, because they are absolutely not going to get help with their leadership development. And yet we're putting, the role of solving some of the world's grandest and most perennial problems on their shoulders to fix. And so the organization supports about 300 young women social change leaders a year with access to leadership development and coaching. So yeah, we've been doing this for a little while. So we've supported nearly 1,500 women. They come from more than 80 countries, and we have a good 200 plus volunteer coaches who support them 6 months at a time. Yeah, it's such an honor to do this work.
So tell me about your coaching. So like, who do you coach and what's the focus of your coaching?
Yes, so I said the women themselves, they're social change leaders, and they're between the ages of 25 and 35 years old. They're already existing leaders, so they are nonprofit founders, social impact entrepreneurs, activists. They work inside nonprofits, large nonprofits, or they have been founders of nonprofits themselves. And what's extraordinary to me, since I've been doing this work for so long, is that the vast majority of them will come to us and they want to work on confidence. It's absolutely astonishing. And to me, we're looking for them based on the scope and scale of their impact in the world. And yet they themselves need to continue to work on bringing their full selves forward and, get saboteurs, really being self-conscious and so on. It's a really big struggle. So I'm always really glad when they say they want to work on things like this with their coach, because I don't know Bill Gates and Melinda Gates terribly well, and I can't remove some of the roadblocks that they have in country, but that's certainly something our coaches can help them with. And I mean, it runs now across the gamut too. So, they're looking at prioritizing self-care, working with their team. Some of them are first-time leaders and managers. So it's very much on the professional side of things, that a lot of the inside-out leadership game. Yeah.
And I'm guessing that maybe your experience with this nonprofit was the inspiration for your new book, Unlocked.
It has been. It was, and I have to tell you the story because, well, as we all were, the spring of 2020, when the pandemic started to really sink in, I was just like everyone else reading the news and very despondent, very not really understanding where we were going to be. My husband's business fell off a cliff, and so we were very worried for the organization, worried about what we're doing. And then on top of that, also by the summer, hearing about the vast numbers of women falling out of the workforce. We know that there are today, and this is nearly 2 years on, there are less women working in America today than there were 30 years ago, because of how many women had to leave, right? Because they're taking care of children. They're the ones who aren't earning as much as their partners, because we know of systemic gender bias and so on. And so it just made good sense as a family for those women to leave. We saw the numbers of sexual violence increasing. 32 million girls didn't go to school today. And the Malala Fund said another 20 million girls will not return to school because of the COVID pandemic. They just will never go back. And so all of these signs for gender equity were going absolutely backwards. We'd made very slim gains as it was. And then here we are, 36 years of lost progress. So the World Economic Forum said for their Women in the Workplace study for 2020, 36 years of lost progress. And I was despondent because I run an organization that helps young women. And I'm thinking, wow, if I feel like this and I know all of these incredible women that are doing all these awesome things, but nobody else knows about them and nobody else knows about the great work. Like this is a problem. So I decided to write the book, and it is 2 parts. The first part is sharing more stories, more of the impact that women who are just like you and me have been able to achieve with very little. And then the second half of the book is really practical, which is like, so what can we do? Because the problems do seem really insurmountable and a really big challenge. And so but I think we can feel like we can just check out completely because it's so hard to think we can solve this. But it really is in the sum of the parts and the sum of the millions and millions of actions that we can all take to help another sister rise. So that's the practical side of the book.
Well, you interviewed empowered women in your book. And I know your focus was to provide role models for other women, much like what we do, of course, on Trailblazers Impact.
It's amazing. Absolutely.
So tell us a story illustrating how a couple of the women that you have interviewed have empowered other women.
Yeah, thank you. Well, one of my favorites actually is a lady called Tracy Chow, and she was a coaching fellow of ours in 2015. And so Tracy, she is a computer engineer, software engineer. She has a master's degree in software engineering and artificial intelligence, and started her career in Silicon Valley as a young female coder, if you will. And experienced a lot of both racial and sexual bias, sexual abuse and gender bias as a young woman, very often the only woman in the room in technology. And had a lot of, I write about it in the book, but it had a lot of very difficult experiences. And then she found herself at Pinterest and loved her role, was very respected. She went to the largest conference for women in technology. And there she kept hearing all the numbers. Sheryl Sandberg in particular was talking about how many women do we really have in technology? How many women of color do we have in technology? And all of this kept banding around, and Tracy realized that nobody actually really knew the numbers. They could see them for themselves. Well, I'm the only one in this office here. But we didn't really have a true picture in terms of Silicon Valley companies, how many women were in technology and how many of those were in leadership positions. So she decided that she was just going to write a blog post. And so Tracy never saw herself as an activist. She's a computer scientist. And so she said, well, I'm just going to try and get some data. Like, why don't we just try and find that out? So she actually got her own data from Pinterest and published that as part of the blog post. And then she invited others. She said, please share wherever you are. Like, how many women do you have in tech? And the blog post was called Where Are All the Numbers? And she asked people to check the answers into GitHub, which is a repository for a lot of coders. And so, kind of happened for the first week. And by the second week, it took off like a rocket ship, to the point that within 3 weeks later, the likes of Google and Facebook and Twitter, and you name the giant tech company, Microsoft, they all shared their diversity data. And this was a revelation. So we know at that time, 17% of engineers were working at Facebook were women. Only 17%. And I mean, the numbers across the board were diabolical. So what that forced people to do going forward was to release on an annual basis their diversity data. So now we know how many more women does Google hire into these roles, how many are in senior leadership roles, what about people of color, etc. So Tracy's incredibly small action led to the entire reckoning of diversity within the technology industry. And I share her story because she was an unsuspected activist, first of all. So, she did something because she cared. She cared about the numbers. And she said, well, I'm just going to try. I'm going to get a little bit more curious. And she also focused on something which she knew a lot about, which was data. And so she played to her strength. That also happened to be the strength of a lot of other engineers who love data. So she was able to tap into, the kind of the what drew people into sharing. So she got that information quite quickly. What I really just love about this is that she just did it. And I think we don't realize that some of our actions, they might seem small. It's a blog post, but we have no idea where that will take us and what might happen. And maybe it's only 1 in 100,000 that will get picked up and read up to that level, or 1 in 1,000,000. But who knows? And if we don't all try, then we have no idea where our actions will take us.
Well, I think it also helped that it came from within the same industry.
Yes.
Something inside up rather than outside in, I think may make a difference.
Definitely. Absolutely. And she knew the industry for herself as a woman living with that lived experience, most definitely. But yes, you're right, of course. And so, trying to change the system from within is, often the only way it's going to happen. And then the other lady I wanted to talk about was Sophie McNaught. She's an Australian lady, and she has a background in finance. She is the founder of an organization which is now called The Shed. What she started when she just graduated, actually, and she realized that a lot of the people that she studied with, the men, were talking about how much they were earning. They were talking about investing. They were talking all about money. But she didn't ever have conversations with money with her girlfriends. And realized that, talking about money is actually a really big challenge for women. So just decided to have wine and cheese on a Friday every month to talk about money. And so now she's created this massive community, which is all about women helping women, talking about money, talking about finances. It's really, it's again something which started as, hey, why don't six of us just to get together and have a glass of wine and get comfortable with being uncomfortable talking about money. It has, empowered those women to feel much more confident in asking for what they're worth in terms of their salary, and to consider getting financial advisors, and already at a very young age recognizing the importance of investing and making their money work harder for them.
So it had a lasting impact on a lot of people and made a difference.
Sincerely so, yes, absolutely. And now there are many of these kinds of communities focused on supporting women and talking about money and financial advice, women helping women about that. But it's one of the, I know we're going to get a little bit maybe onto some of the practical sides, but this money topic is such a hot topic, I think, for women. There's a lot wrapped up in there. So yeah, very impactful.
So tell me a little bit how your book is a toolkit and practical guide, really, to creating lasting change, not just tomorrow.
Yeah, and I love that you're asking me this, and I have to give you my I don't know, my get out of jail card or something like this, because when I wrote these keys, Nan, I was saying to myself, just like a lot of women are doing, they're second guessing themselves, and I'm saying, they're not new. These keys aren't new. Is this revelation? Is it, gosh, is this going to like change the world? And, I had a lot of doubt, because they're 10 practical, easy, repeatable things that everyone can do to help a sister. And at the end of the day, I said to myself, well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they'll change the world, but what I can tell you is that each of us have been helped by another woman, which made a significant difference in our lives. Every one of us has a story where someone stood behind us, or someone gave us a piece of advice, or made an intro, which changed the trajectory of our lives. And so I thought, okay, well, yes, I actually really do believe in these 10 keys. And they are things, as I said, that each of us can do, and each of us need to do for ourselves as well as everybody else. And would you like me to maybe share a couple of them?
Well, just give me one so we get an idea.
Just one, absolutely, yeah. So I talked about the money one. That's normally the one, it's my go-to, but we've already just talked about that a little bit. Actually talk about money is probably my most favorite key, as I think it unlocks so much for us. One of the second ones to me, and again, it's not rocket science now, is to be the example, and we know all about role models. We know this, and the stories that you were sharing on your show. This is so important, but the piece which gets me is to really share the God's honest version of your life. For the longest time, I didn't share that I'm some small kid from the middle of nowhere who worked on the factory floor with her mother, for 3 years, because I look like, I worked at Mozilla and eBay, and I've written a book, and now I help these social change leaders. Oh, and you have some idea of who I am. And it's like, no, life is not linear, right? We have stories, and that's what makes us so compelling. Like, we want to hear your heroine's journey. We want to hear the triumph and the trenches. And so to be the example, but to show all of ourselves is so important, so that another woman can see it's okay where I am right now, and that maybe I'll ask for your help and you can help pull me up, but if we just think everybody is perfect mothers, perfect executives, perfect daughters, it's just we're just going to kill ourselves in the process. So what is Leonard Cohen saying? There's something about there are cracks. It's where the light shines in. It's like that's what makes us beautiful. So yeah, proudly share your cracks.
Well, what are your hopes for the future of women?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of thinking about this, Nan, and it's not just the future of women; it's the future of humanity, if you will. If I'm going to be grand for a second, because I feel like, I've spent my days working toward gender equity. I write in the back of my book, I want to see gender equity in our lifetime. I'm done. Like, how can we still be working on this? And our sisters before us, like we have to make this stop. And I have changed my mind, and I no longer want to work on gender equity. And it's no longer what I wish for women is gender equity, but rather that we create a whole new system, because equal to a system which is failing vast majority of people, which is failing our planet, which is failing humanity and human rights and so on, like that is not a world to be equal to. So we must, when we put women in positions of power and influence, then we not only change that for women, we change it for everybody, because we need different perspectives, we need different backgrounds, and women's voices are missing right now.
Well, what are some suggestions you have for women today? And I would say especially those over 50.
Yeah, well, I think that we have so much to give and support our younger women. And one of the biggest things that I see that is not happening is helping our younger women thrive. So one of the biggest challenges, they call it the broken rung, which is that young woman who just cannot get her first leadership role. And as women who are a little older, maybe we have more experience, maybe we have more power, influence. Even if we don't, we have a lot of experience that we can be imparting down to our younger women. And helping them get that first step on the ladder is critical for the trajectory that individual, and therefore all of us, is going to be on. The other, like the inward piece, is just like, I'm like, gosh, at 50, like this is the time of our lives, right? This is us living out in the world. We've hopefully, got a bit more time on our hands. We have a bit more money in our pockets. I do hope so. Our health is still good. So we should be, this should be the decade. This should be like us living the best of our lives. So to be unfettered and to be just doing whatever you want, like that will serve humanity as well in massive ways.
It's kind of funny. I have heard people say quite a bit lately, and I'm talking about people that are in their maybe early or mid 50s, say things like, I don't want to be, in a sense, the grandmotherly type that I have seen in the past. I don't want to just stay home and take care of my grandchildren. I feel like it's my time to live. Are you hearing any of that?
Yes, and well, I'm getting there as well. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. It's our time to live. And I think it is difficult. It's very difficult for women in the past over 50. I certainly know a lot of women who have been let go. They struggle to find a job. There's a lot of ageism and bias in that, particularly for women. And I see women now just deciding to create their own companies. They're just done. They're like, whether I'm a solo entrepreneur, I have a small team, or I'm hell-bent on building a big organization, but some of the most successful entrepreneurs are women over 50 and unapologetically wanting to build a company the way that they want to build it. So I am seeing more of it, and I hope that you and I were feeling more of that in the world too.
I think that's really true. And I hope I have my book that I have coming out that I was telling you about is really a blueprint for women over 50 on how to start and run a business. Because I think that's where people are starting to look and say, I want to do something with my life. I'm not over yet. It's not done.
No, you are just beginning. You are just absolutely beginning. And with all that knowledge and all of that strength and wisdom, I think to myself, about how strong women are and what we've endured, right, over the decades as from bias, from, having to do it all. Like, man, there is a lot of resiliency and a lot of knowledge, which is just dying to be brought out in the world. Chip Connolly was the founder of Joie de Vivre Hotels. He worked at Airbnb for a really long time. He has a book called, and I think it's called Wisdom at Work or something like this, but Chip Connolly, a wonderful man, wonderful book, but he talks about like the wise generation, and that this is the moment for us to really be leading, because our young startup folks, you know, are, we need them too, but wow, there's a lot of knowledge and wealth sharing that we can be doing.
Well, it's been so much fun to talk with you, Jane. You know, I wish you great success in your book. Everybody should pick it up. Remember, it's called Unlocked, and we will promote it on our website, right on your guest page, and people can actually purchase it from there directly with Amazon. But is there anything else you would like to say to us?
Well, I particularly for all the ladies that are listening, you know, I just my greatest wish is that women know just how incredible and how powerful they are at their core, and that they can do anything that they can put their mind to. It's and we need it. We need it.
We do need it. We need it for them, for us, and really for the world.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy that episode? We appreciate hearing from you, and we'd love to post your review. My email is nan@nanmckayconnects.com. You can find all of our resources, podcast, and YouTube channel from our website, trailblazersimpact.com. Please subscribe, and thanks for being part of our team.